All right, so we were talking about specifically Batman.
We're talking about the fall of 90s toys.
90s toys.
How they kind of rose and fell in the 90s, and the Batman line, particularly by Kenner, is a good example.
Because it really exemplified this.
Well, because they started off so great. Like, you see the Kenner in the 80s obviously has the superpowers Batman. You get the Batman, the Penguin, the Batmobile down there. That was... So in the 80s, superpowers to me are like a really big jump forward in toys, because in the 80s, like if you think about it, at that time, all you have is pretty much Star Wars, He-Man, G.I. Joe, and those figures are pretty much 5 points of articulation. G.I. Joe, obviously better. But the superpowers figures are called superpowers because they all have a superpower, right? Batman punches when he squeezes his legs, Aquaman swims when he squeezes his arms. So they were like a really big step forward as far as, making toys.
Yeah,
better, right?
Yep.
So that's Kenner in the 80s with Batman. Then the license for the movie, the famous Tim Burton movie, goes to Toy Biz in the 90s. And it made some incredible vehicles. These are two of my favorite vehicles of all time. The Batmobile and obviously the Batwing. You can really tell, specifically on the Batmobile, how unaware they were caught by this movie. You can see it's clearly a superpowers Batman, just painted black, which is completely different than the Batman they released. We have it, we can film it, but yeah. So that's what Toy Biz was doing, and then the license goes back to Kenner before the second movie comes out, which is like 1990 or something. And they made what are really the Batman figures. They had this incredible likeness to Michael Keaton, and they were smart because they put money on the face, the likeness. And they were smart because they were able to recycle that Batman figure into, Laser Blast Batman, Arctic Blast Batman. So they're able to take that mold and stretch it out and make a lot of money off it.
Which they're kind of notorious for, right?
Kenner?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
they're the biggest.
Robin Hood taking,
Superpowers and Star Wars, yeah.
Yeah, pretty impressive.
This is what they did. Skywinch Batman is a good example of one that was released in the Dark Knight collection, and then also released in the Batman Returns line. But he's a good example because you can see this likeness of Michael Keaton. Remember what figures are looking like at this time? This is an incredible likeness. I can't think of a better likeness at this time of a figure. Like, what's out? What are the big movies that have had figures by 1990s? Star Wars, obviously. Indiana Jones. Those likenesses don't match this at all.
Agreed.
So that's the Dark Knight collection. By the time they get to Batman Returns, which is about a year later, they got a little lazy. They mostly just re-released figures. Penguin is an interesting example because they get a lot of flack for being lazy. It's obviously a superpowers Penguin, just different colors. My personal opinion is that they couldn't have made the Penguin from Batman Returns because it was kind of scary. They didn't think kids would buy it. He spit up black blood. So I think that's why this figure is just a superpowers repaint, or it could be that they're lazy.
So yeah.
So far we're at 91, early 90s, looking good. Next thing that Kenner rolls out is the animated series. This is Clayface because it's one of my favorite animated series figures. It's one of the best ones. Not a huge step forward from superpowers, but decent. Like they're still holding on, still not bad, not great. These figures don't really go for too much, but I still like them, particularly the Clayface. And then you get to when Batman and Robin, or this is Batman Forever, sorry. Batman Forever comes out in 95. So this is the mid-90s. So you can see, so far we've gone from those Batman Forever figures you saw, the Batman Returns figures you saw, to the Batman animated series figures you saw, to this. So this is 1995. Keep in mind, this is going, later. They should be getting better, right? Not worse. But these Batman Forever figures are they should be ashamed of themselves. They're so bad.
So, and what year is this again?
It's 95.
95. Yeah. So, I guess we're really looking at a degradation from
they're getting worse, which is
80s toys were badass.
Yeah, like we were talking about the superpowers Batman, which is a beautiful figure. It has superpowers, the Batmobile, and that's like 19.
They were inventive. They captured the imagination.
Yes,
You know,
no figures before them had action features. Even the Boba Fett that shot the rocket obviously was never released. So nobody ever really did what they did with those superpowers figures. They were and keep in mind the biggest competition for them is Mattel's Secret Wars, and their get was that they had holographic shields. Like, imagine the difference there. So Kenner is like making these huge strides in action figures. They've come out with Star Wars and changed everything. Then they fire back with superpowers, and it's like, wow, man, they're changing toys. And then in the 90s, this is what they're doing. Terrible what they did.
So really kind of the mid-90s is probably the pinnacle of the worst toy crimes committed by...
And not only, keep in mind, not only are these toys the worst, but they're mass producing them. There's so many of them being made. The reason why Star Wars figures in value go down as that original trilogy progresses is because they're being smart and they're realizing to make more and more and more. They realize the more they make, the more they sell, the more money they make. So that's why in the 90s, those Star Wars figures are just so mass produced. There's just no value to them. They were smart. They made the most money. But at the end, that's the death knell for Kenner, right?
Yeah.
Lose the license in the middle of those Star Wars figures.
So let's go into the next room and look at some other products of the 90s.
Let's do it. So then, speaking of Kenner, their 90s crimes. 1991, which we were looking at, that would be the equivalent of the Batman Returns figures we were looking at. So this is what they do with the Terminator license. Terminator 2 is a huge film. If anyone remembers 1991, this was the biggest film of the year.
Yeah, what
and
a
this
cool
is what Kenner is rolling out in 91. Keep in mind, this is Kenner. They have revolutionized toys with Star Wars, Indiana Jones, superpowers. This is what they're rolling out 9 years after.
They basically invented the 3 3/4 inch figure.
They absolutely did, and this is what they're giving you.
These are
I
no
always
longer
thought the John Connor was cool because he came with the bike, but like if you're looking at these, they're just absolute trash.
Yeah, but they really didn't give a damn about the likenesses here.
Well, they're not that bad, particularly Arnold. I guess it's not great. It's way worse on what's the guy that played the T-1000?
Yeah, Robert Patrick.
Robert Patrick, yeah, that one. Well, I don't know. They're both pretty rotten.
I guess if you squint and really use your imagination.
Well, the thing about the Terminator figures is then they went on to make these Future Wars, which I'm looking for one.
right behind here.
These are the worst. Yeah, again, you go back to, that particular one is just a remold.
Oh,
here we
what's
go.
that?
Yeah. So, does anybody remember this guy from Terminator 2?
No.
It looks like Kuatu from Total Recall, except as a human.
It does look like
it's Kuatu.
Like we could take that head off.
Don't we remember when Kuatu had a claw hand in Terminator 2?
Yeah, it's kind of a malformed hand.
So that
I felt bad for him.
Yeah. So then they also had the license for the Aliens figure.
Okay, so two of the biggest license, like, Terminator 2. Aliens is freaking cool. Of course, this comes much later than the actual film, because the film was like 87 or something
almost
like that.
5 years or so.
But let's
so
because they did such a good job with Terminator 2, let's give them the Aliens.
So this is the year after the Terminator 2 figure. So the next year, they've got these Kenner aliens. If you're looking at the Queen, this is a bad example if you're trying to bash the line, because it's not terrible.
Does not look like the Alien Queen. Does not look.
Yeah. Like you've got
James Cameron's design.
This is what they would have looked like, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, because aren't the reaction aliens off of Kenner
Well, yeah, it was Kenner, back probably the same geniuses that brought us the original Star Wars line did sculpts for...
And they're not bad.
The 1979...
Considering it's the late 70s, not bad.
Let's just do a comparison. Okay, these figures... And here's a human here.
This is a bad example if you use a human, because they're just they're awful.
But you kind of see that it doesn't look that different from the Riddler in Batman Forever,
Yeah, 4 years before.
But, oh man! And then you just kind of for a gasp of air with these beautiful.
Well, one difference. To be fair, they have the likeness rights. The Kenner ones, they didn't own the likeness rights. Yeah. But I don't know that they could have done any better if they had.
Then we had, we have some of the vehicles up here as well from that line.
Actually, the vehicles I don't completely hate. Particularly the power loader I thought was cool, but now, again, they just made so much. It's just completely worthless. You show the Bioflesh Regenerator. At least that was like trying to do something different.
Yeah, this I actually really like, because it's kind of... I remember the commercials for this, and I was like, that's pretty cool. So Playmates is an example of, they're not exactly realistic, but these are also based on animated characters, and they're fun.
Playmates got so much out of so little. They are notorious for, if you notice, all Playmates, whether it's Star Trek or Ninja Turtles, the accessories are almost always all the same, which is kind of...
I did not have a Captain Kirk with a Psy or a...
Well, no, I mean all the same color, sorry.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Like, if you look at the Toxic Avenger or whatever, or Ninja Turtles, or Star Trek, whatever Playmates, the accessories are all pretty...
What I liked about him is...
It's a bad example because these are these are different, but that one...
They were somewhat caricatures, like if you're talking about the Playmate Star Trek, but, you know, the weapons were always cool. They had a lot of attention to detail. The costumes, the paint
really
jobs.
Big at the time.
They were
You go to
great.
cons and people were paying hundreds of dollars for those, which now you can't even get $1 for.
Yeah. But I remember what I loved about the Turtles figures so much when they came out is... all the accessories. I felt like I've never seen so many accessories, and these are all the ones that they would likely have. And I loved that it was kind of all connected on like a spruce tree or whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely iconic, particularly with the first series, like Shredder. There's Rocksteady. You can see it's the same thing. There's Splinter in the background. I think they did it to save money. It's just cheaper, but.
I liked that it felt like a model kit or something. It felt like I was getting more value that way.
Now it's become almost iconic. But that's just kind of Playmates. That's just kind of how they do things. But hey, look, let's not bash Playmates, because if you're going to talk about 90s toys, it doesn't get any better than
I
Ninja
think
Turtles, right?
Playmates...
technically late 80s.
Playmates kind of ruled the 90s. Their Star Trek line was great. The Turtles line was great. I think there's a lot of other... lines in the 90s that we tend to forget about. I kind of liked the Air Raiders stuff. It was pretty inventive.
Exo-Squad is another one.
Exo-Squad was cool.
So, like, these kind of go chronologically, right? Like, as you move over to the left.
Yeah, but it was all consistent quality.
Well, you can see, what I was going to say is you can see as you go how they got better, right? Like, these Power of the Force figures are masterpieces, particularly the Luke Stormtrooper, the Han Carbonite. Those are like masterpieces. You can see Kenner is figuring out how to get better. And then
come the 90s.
They forgot how to figure out how to be better.
Oh.
Check out the sexy chest here.
Yeah, and that's really not that different from the standalone figure that came out in 95.
If you look at like unproduced prototypes of the 80s, you'll see they tried to do a lot of this deluxe figures. They tried to do it with Star Wars, Superpowers, Thundercats. There's a lot of unreleased prototypes of deluxe figures, which is just another way to add a little bit of something that you don't have to particularly work hard on a mold on or pay a likeness for, and reintroduce a figure and get X amount of more dollars from someone. But in the 80s, like, that didn't work. Like, how come in the 90s that worked? I don't get it. It's like in the 90s we all kind of forgave. I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, I really feel like in the 90s they were just going after a quick buck. They had a license. There were no movies out, so they were just trying to package in all this value. I mean, what the hell is that?
Value? Is that what you think when you look at these?
Wow, why? How do we get them to buy one more Luke? Let's put something that was never in the movie or expanded universe or anything.
Baby oil chest Luke and 3 missiles?
Crowd control Stormtrooper. I mean,
color me there.
So 1979 Kidder. Too scary for kids. Too detailed.
Remember the other aliens that we saw?
Yeah. And here we go, like
83.
Late 80s. Kind of strange, but also based on the animated series. But still really cool, inventive play sets.
I don't think they're that strange based on the animated figures. They look exactly like them.
Yeah, they just didn't look like the movie, but it wasn't based on the movie. It's based on But, high quality, molds and accessories and I mean, they hold together pretty well.
Especially that firehouse, man. That's like one of the best places.
I know. Ecto 1 was great.
Oh my gosh.
These role play accessories. You look at the cartoon and they really captured all the detail. I think what's interesting about the X-Wing is here's a case where, a lot of them, they took the electronics and the cool stuff out.
The X-Wing, didn't they make both?
Well, they made... I think they did. Well, I think there was like a set with the TIE Fighter that may have been a Toys R Us exclusive.
Maybe. But I'm pretty sure they made I don't know if it was the X-Wing, but they made some of them were electronic and they had non-electronic.
But I remember, and this will sound really silly to say, but I'm like, oh, that's the same mold as what I had as a kid, so I don't need to seek the vintage ones out anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Except if you look at the vintage one, it's actually better. Like, the artwork is better. I always liked when they would show... The Slave one is another one that makes me, I think of in the Ewok Village, that, like, I like to show what it looks like, you know, like when you have the figures.
Yeah.
And, you know, the artwork is better. It's just... Even the TIE Fighter itself, particularly the battle damage one, is just better.
Yeah.
And it came out 10 years, 15 years before that.
Yeah.
So
and they didn't even care that it wasn't Luke X-Wing, and they'd probably...
Yeah, Luke at Tatooine.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, just
Muscle-bound Luke, He-Man Luke.
Hulk Hogan Luke is, like, flying around.
Yeah. All the care for detail.
But, yeah, it's just, like, all the things that was good about that line, they just completely abandoned it.
The 90s sucked for toys.
Even when you do, like, you release these original figures, like, look, same figures, it's not as good, right? It's just so ho-hum. Oh, here's a couple cards, you know, like, why would I buy this? It doesn't, nothing about this artwork or the packaging or anything makes me want to give you money for this. I don't know. I don't like 90s toys.
90s toys.
That's what I think about 90s.
Sucked for the most part.
Too many of them, not good enough.